Jamal, welcome. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Mark. Always a pleasure.
So and I just talked to you about this quickly. Let's briefly go over the background of you in tech sales, how you got to this point, and how you started Mega Deal Secrets, and then I want to dive right into our topic today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 52, and at 49, I was like, I've learned a ton. I've learned a ton about enterprise sales. What do I want to do next? Do I want to go to management or not? I decided no, that's not for me. I love being an individual contributor, and yet I was looking for a new challenge. And I just started to kind of become open to whatever possibilities and just get myself out there. And so I went to some people who I knew were doing podcasts about sales, and I got on a few podcasts, and the response was very encouraging. Every time I do a podcast, like 30 or 40 sellers would hit me up on LinkedIn and say, it's a great story, and how do you do what you do, and all these things. And one thing led to another. I started the Sales Tribe, which is, in the beginning, it's just been a LinkedIn group, but now it's growing into more. And then it turned into teaching people at scale. And that scale started with like 5 to 10 at a time. And now that's starting to grow. And that's really where it caught on. It caught on from enterprise sellers talking to each other about what the realities of doing complex selling, what those realities really are all about. And when we talk to each other at that kind of authentic and on the ground truth level, it resonates. And I'm able to teach some stuff, but I'm also able to learn a ton with every group of people that I work with. So that's really where it started.
And let's talk about, I mean, we met through Mega Deal Secrets. Let's talk about what made you, like, what gap did you see that made you want to fill that? I have my thoughts on that too, but why Mega Deal Secrets?
So I guess it partially started because I hate sales training. Almost every sales training that I've ever taken has left me feeling empty and frustrated and just oversaturated with content. And the only training that I ever really got was this boot camp style where, they shoved the whole sales team into a room for 2 days. And, we're salespeople. We have an attention span of like 20 minutes. So 20 minutes into the 2 days, we're all somewhere else. And then you get the forgetting curve on the other end, which is after 2 days of content, if there's no repeated exercise of that learning, we lose it up to 70% within 48 hours of a classroom-like experience. So I hated that experience, and I really just wanted to be with the sellers over time as they were growing a completely different type of deal and a completely different type of sales cycle. So instead of doing like a boot camp, a bunch of people, just consuming content for 2 days, we take these bite-sized chunks over several weeks and we implement them and we practice with them. And then we come back and, when there are questions and exercises what I want to be a part of is not a training process, but rather a proving ground. This place where you take out new kit and toys and gear and you field test it and you see what works and you change your process and you iterate from there until you reach the outcomes that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've seen from you in particular versus other sales training, I've gone through some typical sales training too. And you're right, it's the 2-day cram of a framework, and that framework's going to work come hell or high water, is being open to the situation, especially when it comes to enterprise deals, right? Which are so so fraught with different types of scenarios that can come up, that no framework that you can just apply. I think it's a principled approach that you have that has to be open to what's actually going on the ground. And I found that really, really different.
I always hesitated with calling what I had a methodology, because a methodology, a framework, they all have these connotations of step 1, step 2, step 3. And there's a linear nature to it. And you basically just said it. There's almost nothing linear about a complex sales cycle, and things can catch you off guard and come out of the blue, and really good things can happen unexpectedly. Really bad things can. And timelines change, players change, and within that, instead of having a framework, you need a toolkit. You need a basket of assets that you can use as needed, rather than, oh, I got to do this thing first and then this other thing, and here's a script, and because you need to be able to think on your feet and move with the tide.
So I want to jump into, I mean, you primarily work with VPs of sales and other sales leaders with Mega Deal Secrets. What's the message going out to them? What are they reaching out to you about? I mean, we've talked so much about this small deal size, funnel math approach to sales, more volume, more dials, more emails, more blasts. What's the market saying about that? I mean, what's resonating?
Um, the type of sales leader who comes to me is they have a team or a company who is at the level of maturity where they're well past getting their first customer, and they've created a fairly repetitive process for lead generation and processing new opportunities and closing business, and they've reached this kind of perceived ceiling in deal size where their team just has this belief barrier about what they're going to sell, and it really has a hard time bumping through that. And what they're looking to do is break through it. They've gone through this whole first iteration and they've reached this plateau in sales, and it's all small deals. And I get some CEOs coming to me saying, my guys do deals at 50K, but I have to not only be involved, but lead deals at 250 and up. And I can't take that much time away from my day job to lead all these sales cycles. I need the sales teams to kind of tee these things up, and I'm happy to be involved, and I should be, but to lead them, I can't do that. I need them to be able to do that. And so absolutely, it's I don't believe that at the more mature levels of enterprise selling that it's not a numbers game. It starts in the beginning. You're getting your processes down, and that needs to be there. But then at some point, you need to grow a new capability, which is not about numbers, it's about impact. And so more dials and more sequences and more outreach, it's going to fall flat because you're starting, the bigger your deal size gets, the more senior the customer stakeholder you need to engage with. And all of the sales tech and all of the SDR outreach process, none of that is going to break through the armor of a well-gated executive.
And this is really, so this is good, Jill's right into the topic that I wanted to get you on to talk about, which was existing customer base versus new logos, right? And we see so many companies just obsessed with that funnel math, adding new prospects to the top of the funnel and just taking them through your sales process to get a 50K deal versus tapping into your existing customer base and attempting to make a real partnership. And my question to you is kind of like, why do you think that happens? Why is there such an obsession with building this engine, the SDRs, the AEs, new logos? Why do people miss the gold mine that's kind of right in front of them in terms of the existing customer base?
Well, I think that there's a lot of focus on new logos at the first stages. That A and B rounds, it's all about, how do you just kind of have your coming out party, right? You not only exist, but you're open, your doors are open, and you're taking orders, and you get some logos, and that's what it's all about to kind of get to the next level of funding. But really, there's a break point where just getting new logos is going to be much less important than actually driving new revenue. And they seem to be in that same place where you've done it enough where there's enough of a process where it's in place. Those small deals are not going to go away. It's just run rate business, and that's great. But if you want to really accelerate your revenues, the younger companies want revenues. The more mature companies want profits. Both of those can be greatly assisted with much higher transaction amounts. I saw a statistic from a McKinsey report that said in many cases, more than 40% of a company's top line revenue will come from about 1% of their pipeline. And for sure, larger deals happen with existing customers. We've been stuck in the world of land and expand for so long. We're very focused on the land and not so much on the expand. And if you leave that expansion to the customer, it ain't going to happen. I can't tell you how many times I hear from customers, we've got this bundle of vendors that are just, not adding value, not adding the, we discussed that before. You've heard it too. And here's another story for you. I just heard of a company who's trying to raise funding, and they've got a potential funder on the hook, but the potential funder said, a bunch of your renewals are about to come up. Let's talk when you're on the other side of that quarter, because we want to see how your renewals go. So the VC world is really starting to catch up. They're starting to say, okay, it's not about the first sale, it's about the second.
So true. So, I mean, that's really, this whole game is based on lifetime value. That's what kills me, right? Because you look at the new logo, and it doesn't matter if you're grabbing all these logos and they're not successful off the other end. But let's dig into another thing that you just said, which is the land and expand, because I think we could really talk about that for a while. I think land and expand is probably, I don't know, I wouldn't say land and expand is dead, but if a rep comes to you as a sales manager and says, I'm going to land and expand this one, based on what we've talked about, I would really question that rep, right? Who is your current contact in there, and how do you plan to expand this account? Are you just planning to hand this over to CS and let them slowly do onboardings, and after a couple of renewals you'll go for a slight upsell? Because if you don't totally change the value proposition, involve your executives, and get to the highest level, we both know that deal's never going to turn into an enterprise deal. And that's the case for so many companies. And the other thing that it does, as you brought up too, is the really big companies, the Fortune 500 companies, the dream customers, they don't want to do business with somebody who's just looking to do a small 50K deal and then barely support them later and come to them for higher renewal prices. I've actually heard this from multiple big companies that I'm not going to name, but everybody would know and say, I hope I can keep doing business with that company, who are doing exactly what you said. We are looking at companies that wanted to do a small, quick deal with us and just want to renew us forever, and we're eliminating them. We're killing them.
Yeah. I think a smart sales leader is going to look at all of their opportunities like a portfolio. You're going to have your large cap and small cap and index funds and alternative investments. It's all there in the portfolio. And I think that there needs to be a space carved out for the strategic deals. And strategic, that's a very vague term. What's a strategic deal? On one extreme, a strategic deal could be just chase that logo. We've got to have Cargill, right? They're the ones that we need because. On the other extreme, it could be strategic because they're seen as the thought leader in their space in new technology. And even further, it's strategic because it's really going to help us get our revenues really, really high. And when you said you got to question the rep, I think it depends on which rep, because I think that there's a place for the SDRs and part of my portfolio. I want it to be like a bond that just throws off 4 to 6%. If I can only find a bond like that now, but let's say the 2 to 3% coming off of something that's near cash, and that's all I expect. But it's fairly stable. And a chunk of my portfolio, I want them to do that. So the land and expand, we can let that happen there because it's just run rate is just kind of building. But there's a chunk, which is, like my VC or my high growth potential. And I want to put a few of my best reps on that who have the ability to gain the attention of much more senior stakeholders within the customer, as well as who can work with our own internal executives to be able to have a much more senior conversation. Because selling at that level is not about, here's a widget, here's a subscription, try us out and then renew. It's about, how can we move the needle in your business? Very, very different conversation. It's not product focused. It's problem or opportunity focused, and it's a totally different language, and you got to fit it into which which financial ratio is actually going to move because of the work that we can help you do. I mean, I could go on and on, but you know, I call it selling above the clouds. I think I've mentioned that to you before. When you get beyond the bits and bytes and the features and functions and even the benefit conversation, and you get into, you know, how can we help you hit the, you know, your growth targets for next year because you have a gap somewhere in the guts of your organization. How can we help with a growth target? It's just another world.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you hit on this, Jamal, because let's be helpful in terms of you and I talking rather than just saying, you know, something's dead. This is what an enterprise sale really is, and so many people get this twisted that it's just a big deal, right? I sold my product to more people. It's not what it is at all, right? It's like, so let's talk a little bit about, and you're the master at this, why, and I think it fits in perfectly to why your executives need to be involved in the biggest deals. So when people say when people are like reps are surprised by that and say, I need to involve my VP, I need to involve my CRO. Why do they need to involve their executives in the biggest deals?
Because the biggest deals are the purview, are the scope, are the job description of senior executives. So the senior executives are kind of looking at the whole ship, right? From the top of the mast. They're looking on the ship and they're looking at the land, the you know, the horizon and everything, and they're looking at the big picture. And an individual team or an individual business unit only can see the scope of their little fiefdom, but the senior execs see the whole thing. And when you're speaking to them about a value that could help the whole enterprise or help one business unit that happens to be the priority of the enterprise that year, that's kind of like, oh, okay, now you're talking about something that is actually on my plate. It's one of my MBOs. And so instead of selling tech, it's more like an acquisition strategy. It's more like you know, the strategic roadmap for the company that the board needs to sign off on. And that's why executives need to be involved, because it's not something that a traditional salesperson can do with a traditional kind of person on the shop floor. I lovingly call them worker bees. You know, this is much more about a very senior person at the customer looking at you as a vendor and saying, you know, what am I getting out of these guys? Am I getting a sales guy, or am I getting somebody who can actually assign resources and, you know, deploy people and do exceptional stuff? And when they start working with a peer, then they're like, okay, this has legs. I'm getting the attention. I'm feeling special, and we're speaking the same language. I'm not being sold to. I'm working with somebody, and how can we do business together rather than how, you know, is somebody going to sell me something?
One awesome, like 100% agree. And there's thoughts that I've been having around this that I'd love to just get your feedback live now on. Is one of the other big reasons that your company's executives have to be involved in the deal is because the purchaser is buying more than your product, as you just said, right? Like they're buying a partnership with your company at the very highest deal sizes. When we're talking 5x, when we're talking 10x average deal size, when we're talking 3 to 5 year engagements, that company is buying into the resources late at night if something goes wrong, right? Like that's something I've continually heard. They're buying into the vision of your company, which means they need to talk to somebody that can actually speak to what the vision's going to be. And they're really buying into the long term with you, right? As you said, you're not just a little tool to handle, you know, uploading something faster. They're adding a new capability for some key reason that fits into their strategic mission over the next 3 years or this year in their 10K. They're adding something new and they want you to be a part of that. So when you're looking to do one of these huge deals, you have to think so much bigger, and you have to be able to involve people that can actually back that up at the end. And the other thing about the enterprise deal to me is why companies need to be looking at this is because the typical term to sign up is 3 years, right? I mean, it's a clear commitment when we talk about churn, when we talk about lifetime value. These deals are way more valuable. It's worth the sales cycle. It's worth all the effort because you're getting a true long-term partner rather than the 50K in now that might churn 2 years later.
Yeah, the stickiness of executive engagement is massive when it's backed up by fulfillment from a wider team. So in one sense, when a customer executive engages with a vendor executive, and that's kind of a trigger to really begin a relationship, when they're signing on the dotted line, what they're really doing is they're buying a bat phone. They're buying the ability to, with one call, to get to somebody who will get out of bed and raise massive troops to fix a global problem, at the biggest end of the scale. So the trick is, yeah, you got to have this executive alignment, which I think many companies miss that trick. They don't get the executives involved soon enough or engage in the long term. But then it's got to be full, the fulfillment has also got to be there. So if the only thing that the exec does come in and has a few drinks and has, rubs shoulders and stuff like that, and doesn't bring the expectation of delivery back to the organization, then it kind of falls flat. But if there's no exec engagement in a large deal, that just tells volumes about the commitment of the company and the interest of working with the big name.
So let's talk a little bit about what's possible, right? Like today, even. I mean, you talk so much about mindset, and it's true. You need to basically look at these deals or look at these possibilities completely differently. And actually, I really loved a recent LinkedIn post that you had where it was new rep jumps into a quote unquote crappy account and turns it basically into a mega deal. Can you talk a little bit about that story and then the shifts in mindset and really what's possible when you apply this?
I was guilty for years. So I've been an enterprise seller for 18 years. And for the longest time, I was just as guilty as most of us in terms of looking at my patch. How many accounts did I have? Most of the time I've had named accounts rather than a big geography with hundreds of accounts. So it's usually like 10 to 20 accounts. And I look at those names at the beginning of the year, and let's say 5 of the 20 are current customers. And there's always two or three that are existing customers that are just tough to deal with because they're not doing well. And there's a legacy issue and they don't like us. And the previous reps also did not come through. So it's almost like you don't even want to touch it. But I talk so often about who I call my North Star, Marcy Akers. She's still at Oracle, and she was a senior rep when I just started back in 2009. We were doing deals at like anywhere from 250K to like $1.5 million. That first year, she closed a deal at like 20 million. And
Wow.
this is all on-premise software before SaaS. And then the next year, she did another one for like 30, 35 million. So I was just absolutely starstruck. But I talked with her in the last few months, and I kind of asked her to sum up what's one of the greatest learnings. If you look back on your career, what's one of the greatest learnings that you've had? And she says, I think it is that I have had to learn how to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. She says, because after 20 plus years of doing this, I still get uncomfortable. I go into a room full of executives and it's just me and my pre-sales person, or me and one exec, but I got to do a lot of the talking. And so, these situations, when you deal at that level, it's never comfortable. So if you can learn how to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, you're just going to put yourself in a position where you can actually be in the room. It's almost like hot yoga. You ever done hot yoga? Bikram yoga. I tried it a few
Oh
times,
yeah.
but before I did, my friends would just say, look, the goal of the first time is just stay in the room. Just stay in the room the whole time. If that's all you do, you are successful. That's what it's like
Love
doing
it.
mega deals. When
Yeah.
you're in there with big senior folks, first time, just try to stay in the room. And this comes back to your question. I know it's a roundabout way, but the second thing that Marcy told me was, I said, what do you look for? What's the first thing you look for when you're trying to identify your next big target? or account? And she's like, pain. I look for pain. I look for massive pain. Even if they're mad at us, even if they're mad at our product, as long as it's massive pain, that is the energy that you need to make a change quickly.
Mm.
So what you're doing is if you want to get into this game of doing really large deals and doing them at the executive level, you're the person who is running into the fire, not away from the fire. So, I mean, that from an analogy standpoint, that's pretty much it. If you can learn to do that, you're going to be putting yourself in a position where these big deals are much, much more possible.
And one of the key things that I wanted to get across as well is it is really looking at these deals with a completely different lens, right? Because when you're actually looking at, I'm going to involve my executive stakeholder, I'm going to look for a unique value proposition, you're in some cases walking into the deal, if you inherited it, with a completely different positioning or a completely different message than the previous rep.
Yeah, could be. I mean, and it's got to be the, typically when that happens, the previous rep is focused on the product, and you need to focus on the value, the problem, the opportunity. We need to shift away from the sales role and get into the corporate fixer role. It's like we kind of self-nominate ourselves to become an unnamed executive because we're going to have to be in that room with them all the time. Nobody's going to give us the title. We just got to take it and start behaving that way.
So let's talk quickly about what you could do today, because I know you've got the mega deal challenge coming, which this kind of ties into a little bit. So I do want to talk about that as well. But if you're a rep in 2020, it's been a rough year, and it's been a rough year for your customer base. But that's the other thing, right? It's been tough for you to actually fill the funnel and get a whole bunch of new prospects, but they're going through hell, right? They're going through cash flow issues. They might be claiming bankruptcy if they're a major retailer. It's a nightmare. And so let's talk about what you could do if you're a rep today with the traditional mindset that wants to shift into this new mega dealer mindset. Because we both know it's possible, right? I know what's possible because I've seen it and I've done it. I know what's possible if you're willing to engage your own executive team, if you're willing to look at accounts that should be 10x in your mind or their mind, if you're willing to bring a unique value proposition that can really help during a disastrous time. I know what's possible. And so where do you coach people to start normally? I think this ties into what the challenge will actually be, but where should people start?
I mean, so there's what quick wins are possible. And the other thing is, how do I build my capability to go do larger deals? And that's not a short-term effort. If I was starting from zero today, what I would do, I think word has got out several months ago that everybody's budgets have been cut and shifted. They've been cut across the boards, and what's remaining has been shifted to helping people work from home, doing whatever's needed to take care of customers remotely, and to cut hard costs wherever possible right now. The first layer of solutions that can do that, and it doesn't even take much explaining, are getting the lion's shares of the deal right now. They're obvious, they're compelling, and they're urgent, and they're all funded. And that's not even selling, to tell you the truth. You just happen to be in the right place at the right Zoom. I think the sellers at Zoom are, this is windfall time, and it's not doing anything extra special.
Stock has gone up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of layer one, the obvious one. The next one down is to figure out how to sell your same solution a different way. I talk about there's different levels of value propositions. You could sell this mouse to an individual and say, hey, this is a mouse that you can use with your computer and it'll make your life easier. That mouse, you could sell it to a VP and have a different value proposition, which is this is going to in some way, you know, make your team a better team, and we'll shave off so much unproductivity by X%, and that's a bigger dollar amount. Or you could, you know, sell, hey, at the enterprise, it's yet again a different value proposition and a different sell. You can up level your value proposition one notch. You can go from shop floor to mid management, or mid management to senior management. But we're not, typically reps don't do that on their own. It's a joint effort between the sales rep and product strategy and maybe marketing, maybe pre-sales. But getting around the table to say, how do we change what we say about what we do to map to the current situation that we find ourselves in? That's a short-term thing. I ain't saying it easy. It's easy. It's not. But if you can have an immediate change to how we position what we have, that can in some way get up into that bucket of possibility of buying from the customers, that's a short-term thing. In the long term, sure, you know, the pandemic is going to ultimately wind down, and we will be going back to the office more. But I think there's a permanent shift, you know, toward working at home. More and more companies are carving out the long-term strategy of remote work, and as such, our turns at bat in person are going to drop. So as such, we should be going for the land grab that exists in mind share of what people are doing online. You know, LinkedIn viewership is through the roof these days. Social media has increased a lot. And so if we can start to grab the mind share of more senior people by giving them content, information, and assets, that's building our own brands, and that's reaching out to kind of a wider scope of people at a higher level. And to tie into the challenge, that's one of the skills that we're going to be learning is how do we identify the audience that we want to serve?
Mm-hmm.
And we got to bump it up one notch. Whatever we're comfortable with, if we're comfortable with talking with directors, we are going to be doing discomfort challenges by bumping that up to go to the VP level. And then, okay, if it's the VPs in this industry, in this business unit that I really want to serve, what are they into? What do they care about? What are they working on right now? And then how can I become a source of information, assets, connections, guidance, whatever around that thing? How can I get known to be a gateway to value around that one area? Not the whole thing. I'm never going to be better at their job than they are, but I can certainly know one corner of their world better than they do. That's another long answer to your question. You know, what can reps be doing right now?
Well, the point is though, is that there's so much, right? And that's really what the challenge is too. It's like when you can really see this. I mean, I inherited an account that had been at a very low tier, like very low pricing for 3 years roughly. And I walked in there with a completely different message and value proposition than whoever held it before. And actually, before the shutdown, I sat with the person and I actually told them what I was going to do. I said, your organization has barely been using this to its full effect. Here's what it can really do, and kind of mapped that out. And they agreed. This was the director level person that everybody's afraid to go around. And they agreed with me. They said, you know, I know we're barely using this. I would love to see this, and this group use it too. And I just enlisted them to help get me those early introductions. I knew my executives would come in because and that's a whole nother thing. You have to get your executives involved to be able to, as you say, heliski and get to the top immediately to the people that are actually going to resonate with that unique value prop message. But in some cases, this director that you've been dealing with for 2 years isn't necessarily somebody that you need to be, you know, scared of, or that's going to be upset with you. If you can tell them the vision for what you have, they might block you in some cases. And that's a whole nother conversation. but you need to come in with a new message early and identify the executives that are going to resonate with it. And once you have that, it's not that hard to just see that for other accounts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think implicit what you're saying is, how can we make our current contacts look really good?
Mm.
And that goes into how, if this is the constituency or the persona type who I want to serve, how can I make them look good? That's another way of being an asset. I can either bring them stuff, or I can say good things about them to people above them, or I could introduce them to people who are valuable people to know that they don't know today. There's all these things that we can do proactively for our contacts that will give them the confidence that we have their best interests at heart, that any reason that they might have to block us is more or less unfounded, because we're their partners. We want to help them move up as we would like to move up. So our directions are aligned. But yeah, when you take a real focus on the type of person who you'd like to work with, it moves away from selling to them to how do you enable them in multiple ways. One of the exercises we're going to do in this challenge is look at kind of the components of life: physical health, spirituality, finances, relationships, friendships, career, and look at that and then go, okay, now think of your main contact at your best customer. How much of that wheel do you know about in their life? What parts of that wheel, what slices of the pie of that wheel could you actually impact for the better? Broaden your understanding about what you think this relationship should be about. I'm not saying you should all, try to get into their family life, but there are connections and things that you can do to help them far beyond the engagement that you have around some tech solution.
Innovative. I like it. I think, look, you and I could always go on for forever. We've got 4 minutes. Let's I want to talk more about the challenge. I'm excited to be a part of it and be in it. How did it come about? And talk a little bit about mindset too, because it's so critical to be at, like, that's why it's always the first step, is just being able to shift your mindset as a rep to even see the gold where it is, which is in your existing customer base.
So to answer the mindset piece, I think the biggest event that took place in my own professional dealings was when I was in a meeting I had two of my own executives, and I was sitting across from an executive at a customer, and we were bringing up all these topics about how we could discount some pricing and change our services team against the software that we use, blah, blah, blah. And the customer just held up his hands and he said, guys, this is not about discounts and moving around people. This is about how we are collectively going to steward the most important IP in our company. And that changed the whole conversation, and it changed the whole effort that we did, because he raised it up to such a level of crystal clear clarity. It's not about a commercial relationship. It's about this goal of the safekeeping of the IP of an IP driven company. And when he aligned us around that mandate, everything changed. And my mindset changed permanently. I don't think, commercial elements of a deal are always there, but they're just enablers and, scaffolding around building this great sculpture. And the sculpture is the outcome you're trying to give to the customer. It's just scaffolding around it. So mindset is absolutely massive. The challenge came about because there's just too many people asking for coaching and help and trying to learn how to do this. We had to try to figure out a way to do it at scale. So the challenge is, in 2 weeks, like 100 reps have signed up.
It's amazing.
And, they're from everywhere, Workday, Salesforce, IBM, Kira, SalesLoft, Outreach, all these companies, have reps that these messages resonate with. And now there's a way to help. The goal of the challenge is to help reps start their journey toward selling a different way and looking at sales a very, very different way. I can't teach everything in 5 days, but I can change some perspectives and help people get some step results within a matter of days. And if you can change a mindset and get a few quick wins, you can change a whole trajectory. That's what's really behind the challenge.
Spark the interest, right? I mean, they get involved and change their mindset, they can read the rest. It's going to take some time, but they can read up on the rest.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Jamal. Well, thanks so much for joining. I mean, you and I we'll do this again. We could always go over, but so for people that are interested in the Mega Deal Challenge and people that are interested in following you, where can they go get that information? We'll post it in the links and all that stuff.
Yeah, so just you can always hit me up and connect with me, Jamal Reimer, and you can put
Tim.
the spelling of my name in the notes, and then we'll also give you the link to the challenge. But it's megadealsecrets.com/challenge, and it starts in a couple of days. I don't know if we want to date this, but if this gets out quick and you want to be in it, I would sign up right away.
Awesome. Okay, we'll post all the links and everything. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Mark.